okay?
I think so, just a bit shaken.
The world is constantly evolving, and with that, so is technology.
I think it's important to find that balance, you know? It's not just about the work.
For this. And then when I saw the opportunity to join the team and work on this project, I was really excited.
Hello, I was just calling to check in on you. How are things going today?
For Peruso Colazo, I think that's a beautiful way to express your creativity.
You think you can just walk away from this? You're more involved than you realize.
I was telling him, you know, this is the way forward, this is what we should invest in. Yeah, that makes sense.
The late evening sky over the city glowed faintly with the last embers of sunlight as a storm brewed quietly within the James household. Somewhere in a quiet room, a phone buzzed insistently. James's mother gripped it tightly, her voice trembling as she argued with a distant, unyielding man. His words cut through the line like a blade. James had been fired for nothing more than loving a woman with a child. The decision was final, cold, and delivered without mercy. She pressed the phone harder to her ear, her tone sharp with defiance. "Love is not a stain on our family's name," she snapped, her heart aching. "Diep and little Nee are good people. James adores them. How can you destroy him over your pride?" But the man on the other end, his father, spoke only of honor, of the family's reputation, of how no son of his could love a single mother without consequence. When the call ended, silence settled like ash. James's mother stood at the window, the city lights blurred through her unshed tears. She couldn't understand how tradition could harden a heart so completely. Somewhere across town, James himself was reeling. The company he had poured his soul into, the empire he had helped build, had cast him out, not for failure, but for daring to follow his heart. At a construction site on the outskirts of the city, heavy trucks rumbled in with timber, their headlights slicing through the dark. Workers hustled to unload, their voices raised over the roar of engines. A manager reported to the foreman, "Enough wood for the month. Quality checked twice." Yet whispers spread among the workers. James's departure had shaken the company. Some had already quit. Others feared what chaos might come. In a quiet office nearby, the chairman barked orders to salvage the company's image. Salaries would be raised, hours shortened, anything to lure new employees. The walls of the business that James had once called home now seemed to reject his memory, scrubbing away every trace of the man who had once led with compassion. Far away, under the yellow glow of a streetlight, James's mother slowed her car. Her mind elsewhere, she spotted a pair, a drunken man and woman, struggling on the roadside. Compassion overrode caution. She stopped to help, offering a steady hand and a gentle voice. But kindness became her undoing. Moments later, her wallet was gone. Only when the taillights of her car faded into the distance did the couple laugh, clutching their stolen prize. Hours later, she discovered her loss. Her fuel gauge blinked warning red. She reached for her phone, calling James. "Son, I need your help," she whispered, humiliated. "Your father froze my account. I can't even buy gas." James's heart clenched at the sound of her voice. His proud, unshakable mother reduced to this. The next morning, life on the farm carried on. Workers spoke of harvest yields, 30 or 40 tons a month, even in difficult times. But whispers of James's absence lingered there too. His name still echoed in the ledgers, in the rows of crops he had once inspected. in the silence where his presence used to be. In a small rural market, two Diep's laughter danced through the noise as she held little Ni's hand. "Did you have fun at school today?" she asked, and He's enthusiastic nod warmed her heart. Together, they set up a modest stall, selling fresh corn and okra. The sun baked the ground, but customers gathered, drawn by Diep's kindness and Ni's shy smile. Diep borrowed a scale, arranged her produce, and coached Ni on how to greet the buyers. The girl's small hands passed vegetables with careful precision, earning praises and smiles. Each sale was a tiny victory, a step toward survival. They sold out before dusk, packing their empty baskets with quiet satisfaction. Somewhere on the other side of town, James's phone buzzed unanswered. A call, urgent, hopeful, rang and rang, only to meet the hollow voice of a recorded message. The world seemed to conspire to keep them apart for just a little longer. In a nearby office, a tense meeting unfolded. Managers discussed budgets. Two projects had already exceeded 4 billion jong, far beyond the 3 billion allocated. James's absence had left gaps no spreadsheet could hide. The chairman's commands were absolute. From now on, ignore James's instructions. Only the chairman's voice mattered now. At that moment, under the wide evening sky, James stood outside a closed storefront, his reflection staring back at him in the darkened glass. The weight of love and loss pressed down like a storm cloud. He thought of Diep and Ni, the laughter, the simple meals, the way Diep's eyes softened when she spoke of her daughter. He had lost everything for them. But as the night wind carried the faint sound of a child's giggle from a distant street, he realized he didn't regret it. Diep and Ni walked home under the moonlight, their fingers intertwined. Diep glanced at her phone, the unanswered call gnawing at her. But she smiled for Ni's sake. Somewhere out there, James was fighting for them. Somewhere out there, a man who had lost his world still believed love was worth the price. And above them all, the city lights flickered like a constellation of fragile hopes, each one a reminder that even when empires crumble, love's quiet flame can outshine the darkness. The sun rose pale and hesitant over the city, as if unsure whether to warm a world now fractured by betrayal and longing. James woke early, staring at the ceiling of his modest apartment, the weight of yesterday pressing like a stone on his chest. The company he had built his future around had turned its back on him, and yet the image of Diep's gentle smile and Ni's bright eyes gave him the strength to breathe. He sat at the small kitchen table, scrolling through messages, none from the people he once called colleagues. Their silence cut deeper than their rejection. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to the heartbreak of a man who had traded everything for love. James clenched his jaw and whispered to himself, "It was worth it. It has to be." Meanwhile, at the farm, Diep prepared breakfast for Ni, the aroma of rice and fried eggs filling their small home. She moved with quiet efficiency, but her thoughts lingered on the unanswered call from last night. Was James safe? Did he regret everything? She shook off the doubt, forcing a bright smile when Ni ran to the table, her pigtails bouncing. In another part of town, James's mother walked briskly down a village road, her face still pale from yesterday's humiliation. The memory of the theft, the drunken couple's laughter, still burned. She promised herself she would never again underestimate the cruelty of strangers. But beneath her anger was worry for her son. She could feel the walls of the family closing in around him. Their pride, a cage he could not escape. At the construction site, workers murmured uneasily. Without James's leadership, the projects felt rudderless. The manager called for updates. More timber had arrived, but morale was slipping. Whispers about budget overruns and the chairman's harsh commands traveled like wildfire. Loyalty wavered in the absence of the man who had once stood up for them. That afternoon, Diep and Ni set out to the market again, baskets of corn balanced against their hips. The sun was merciless, but Diep's voice was cheerful as she called out to customers. Ni stood proudly beside her, handing produce to buyers with a shy grin. Diep caught the admiring glances of villagers and felt a flicker of pride. It wasn't wealth, but it was honest work, and it kept hope alive. Far away, James dialed Diep's number again, his hands trembling slightly. The line rang and rang, then cut off once more. Frustration tightened his chest. He longed to hear her voice, to reassure her that he had no regrets, that their love was worth more than any empire. But the world seemed determined to keep them apart, testing the very resolve that bound them. Back at the company headquarters, a tense meeting unfolded. The chairman stood at the head of the table, his voice cold as he demanded clear reports on the overspending. The managers shuffled papers nervously, aware that without James's guidance, the projects had spiraled out of control. One dared to mention James's name, only to be silenced by the chairman's glare. "James is no longer part of this company," he snapped. "Forget him!" But forgetting was impossible. Even now, the workers whispered about him with respect and longing. He had been more than a CEO. He had been their advocate, their protector. Without him, the company felt like a hollow shell. That evening, Diep and Nee walked home under a sky bruised with twilight. The market's laughter faded behind them as they trudged up the dirt path to their small farmhouse. Diep checked her phone again. Still nothing. She told herself he was just busy, but a knot of worry coiled tighter in her stomach. At the same moment, James stood outside a closed cafe, the city lights reflecting in his weary eyes. He thought of the life he had left behind, the office, the prestige, the certainty, and felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. He had chosen love, and though the cost was steep, he would pay it again without hesitation. James's mother, now home, sat alone by the window, the light of a single candle flickering across her features. She wondered if she had failed her son somehow, if her silence in the family's battles had cost him too dearly. Quietly, she resolved to stand by him now, even if it meant defying the man she had once stood beside. As night deepened, Diep tucked Nee into bed, smoothing the child's hair from her forehead. She whispered a soft prayer for James's safety, her voice breaking slightly. Nye stirred, half asleep, and murmured, "Is James coming tomorrow?" Diep swallowed hard. "He'll come soon," she promised, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. In the silence that followed, James walked the empty streets alone. Above him, the city lights shimmered like distant constellations, each one a fragile hope. Somewhere out there, Deepening waited. Somewhere out there, a man who had lost everything still believed that love could outlast disgrace, betrayal, and distance. And with each step, he vowed to prove it true. The next morning broke crisp and bright, sunlight spilling over the city's rooftops as if determined to wash away the darkness of the previous days. James awoke with a start, the memory of unanswered calls and the weight of his father's condemnation pressing against his chest. But beneath the heaviness flickered a stubborn ember, his love for Diep and little Nye. That love was stronger than pride, stronger than fear. He brewed a small pot of coffee in his modest apartment, the bitter aroma filling the room. Each sip steadied him, sharpening his resolve. He would not let silence or shame undo what his heart knew was right. He grabbed his phone and keys, heading out into the bustling streets with a single purpose: to find a way back to the family he had chosen. Far away, Diep rose early as well, her body weary from market work, but her spirit restless. She glanced at her phone. Still no messages. Worry gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on preparing Nee's breakfast. She tied the little girl's hair into neat pigtails and kissed her forehead, whispering a silent hope that James was safe in thinking of them. At the company's headquarters, tension simmered like a storm cloud. The chairman strode through the hallways, issuing orders with clipped efficiency. But unease hung in the air. The workers spoke in hushed tones about James, about the projects faltering without his guidance, about loyalty and betrayal. Even those who had remained silent felt the absence of the man who had once championed them. Meanwhile, James's mother stood on her porch, the morning breeze tugging at her hair. She replayed her son's words, the pain in his voice, and her own quiet failure to shield him. She had been complicit too long in a world where reputation mattered more than kindness. Today, she vowed, would be different. She would no longer be silent. By midday, James arrived at the familiar path that led to the market. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the dark-haired woman and the child whose laughter had become his compass. And then, there they were. Diep was kneeling to adjust Ni's shoe, her face bathed in sunlight. The sight struck him like a blow and a blessing all at once. He hesitated for a moment, fear whispering that he had no right to approach. But then Ni spotted him. Her small face lit up, and she shouted, "James!" Her voice cut through the noise of the market, pure and joyful. Diep looked up, shock and relief mingling in her wide eyes. James stepped forward, his heart pounding. Diep rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "You came," she said, her voice breaking. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I should never have let a single day pass without finding you," he replied. "I lost everything, Diep, but none of it matters if I can't stand here, with you and Ni." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Diep reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his with a tenderness that made his chest ache. "We missed you," she whispered. "We sold out of corn yesterday, but it wasn't the same without you." Her words, simple and ordinary, felt like salvation. The three of them walked together to the edge of the market, Ni skipping happily between them. James bent down to her level, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," he said softly. "But I promise, I'm not going anywhere again." The little girl grinned, her innocence mending wounds that pride and power had inflicted. Later, in a quiet park nearby, James and Diep sat on a bench beneath a sprawling banyan tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling their faces. James took a deep breath. "Your kindness saved me," he confessed. "Even when the world turned its back, I realized love was the only thing worth holding on to." Diep's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief. Back at the company, the chairman's orders faltered as reports of renewed worker unrest reached his desk. The projects needed James, the man he had discarded. Pride wrestled with practicality in his mind, but James was too far beyond his grasp now. James had found a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be measured in numbers or status. That evening, James accompanied Diep and Ni home. They cooked a simple meal together, laughter filling the small farmhouse. As Ni nodded off at the table, Diep caught James's gaze across the flickering lamplight. There was no need for grand declarations. The quiet contentment between them said everything. When night fell, James stepped outside for a moment, gazing up at the star-swept sky. The city lights shimmered faintly in the distance, but here, under the endless expanse of stars, he felt at peace. Losing everything had been painful, but as he listened to the faint sound of Diep humming inside, he knew he had gained something far greater. And as the night wrapped around the small farmhouse, James realized that love, fragile, fierce, and unyielding, had been worth every sacrifice. The world could take his title, his fortune, even his family's approval, but it could not take the quiet, unshakable truth. He had chosen love, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly rich.